The International Criminal Court also issued a decision claiming territorial jurisdiction in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, expressly recognizing and factual questions that surround its ability to do so. Second, against Israel at the ICC increased tensions and to advance a negotiated two-state solution. The only realistic path to end the conflict is Israel and the Palestinians. And we will continue to urge other countries
I thank the States for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Thank you. I also thank Ms. Wensland, the Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, for his briefing, and Mr. Orenge Jian and Ms. Mala Abukusu, excellent and deeply profound presentation. St. Vincent and the Grenadines takes note of the ruling of the international that it has committed in territories. It is critical for the international community to actively participate in the global fight against impunity and render our unwavering support to the ICC. Moreover, we reaffirm that all states must comply with their obligations under the Rome Statute and relevant UN Security Council resolutions to cooperate with the ICC. We welcome the recent announcement that Israel will vaccinate 100,000 Palestinians who regularly cross into Israel for work. Notwithstanding, the rollout of the coronavirus vaccine, with more than half of the occupied West Bank and Gaza yet to receive supplies, needs the urgent attention and support of the international community. We urge Israel to provide more coronavirus vaccines to Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. We also commend the efforts of those countries that have supplied vaccines to the Palestinians and call on the international community to help fill the large funding gap for the Palestinian COVID-19 vaccine plan. We must all work together tirelessly to confront the coronavirus crisis, in line with the UN's principle of leaving no one behind. In East Jerusalem, as in the rest of the West Bank, settlements, the demolition of homes, and the displacement of Palestinians are of deep concern. We condemn the ongoing demolition of Palestinian homes and the forced displacement of Palestinian families, and we call upon the Israeli authorities to halt this unlawful eviction and end illegal demolitions of Palestinian property. Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territory must immediately and completely cease. We reiterate that settlements have no legal validity, constitute a flagrant violation under international law, and must be dismantled. Continued settlement activity violates the fundamental rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination and dangerously imperils the viability of a two-state solution based on the pre-1967 borders. The social and economic impacts of the occupation on the Palestinians in the occupied territory, particularly the Gaza, are increasingly dire. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza remains a deep concern for my delegation, especially now during the COVID-19 pandemic. In this connection, we call on the Israeli government to take additional steps to lift the blockade on Gaza, particularly to allow medical treatment and humanitarian aid to those in need. Similarly, we call on the international community to address the financial situation of UNRWA, which remains a serious concern for millions of Palestinian refugees. St. Vincent and the Grenadines reiterates its support for President Abbas' decree issued on January 15th, setting legislative, presidential, and Palestinian National Council elections for later this year, and welcome steps taken so far towards Palestinian unity. All Palestinians should be granted the opportunity to exercise their constitutional right to vote and contribute towards Palestinian unity. Moreover, we welcome the presidential decree guaranteeing a minimum of 7 parliamentary seats for Palestinians of Christian faith. It is our firm belief that a lasting solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can only be achieved by peaceful means in accordance with international law and the relevant United Nations resolutions, and through credible and direct negotiations. Consequently, we reiterate the call of President Abbas for the United Nations to convene an international peace conference and encourage the Middle East Quartet to assist in this regard, in an effort to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict based on pre-1967 borders. Finally, we call on this Council to explicitly uphold international law in promoting peace and security for the Middle East. From our outstanding youth briefers today, we heard that we need to build trust and we need a just solution for Palestinians. Those are two aims that are inextricably linked. Thank you.
I thank the representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Mr. President, I thank the Special Coordinator, as well as ONTARIEN and Malak Abu Soud for their briefings. France is steadfast in its support for a two-state solution in accordance with the agreed parameters, international law, and the resolutions of this Council. This framework is the only basis thus far arrived at that allows us to provide a just and lasting peace and to, in so doing, contribute to the stability of the region. This is what Israeli and Palestinian young people aspire to, as has been reminded, as our two briefers have reminded us. This solution is the only one that can ensure the security of Israel, something that France will never renege on, and also respect the rights of the Palestinians to self-determination, something that we are deeply committed to. For that reason, France will continue to fully support the creation of two states living in peace and security within secure and recognized borders based on 1967 lines, with both states having Jerusalem as their capital. In this context, we regret the increasing number of fait accompli which jeopardize the viability of the two-state solution. We are very concerned by the record number of demolitions of Palestinian structures at a time when the figures for 2021 are already greater than those of 2020. In this regard, we condemn the new demolitions and confiscations by the Israeli authorities, including of humanitarian structures that have been financed by the international community, including the European Union and France, in the Palestinian village of Hibet Humsa. France calls upon the Israeli authorities to put an end to this as quickly as possible, to facilitate humanitarian access and to respect their obligations under international humanitarian law, in particular the Fourth Geneva Convention, to which Israel is a party. We condemn the continuation of settlement building in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, in particular its creep into sensitive areas such as Givat Hamatos, Har Homa, and the E1 area. We once again call on Israel to reverse these decisions. It is important that we move towards finalizing the Palestinian election process. France welcomed President Abbas's issuing of a decree on the elections. This should be an opportunity to give Palestinian civil society their voice back and to reinvigorate the democratic legitimacy of its institutions. France and its European partners stand ready to support the organization of transparent, free, and impartial elections. France calls upon all actors to act constructively to allow the Palestinian people to appoint their representatives. These elections also need to be organized across the Palestinian territories, including in East Jerusalem. France will remain active to help steadily rebuild trust between the parties, with a view to the resumption of negotiations. We will continue to work to this end with our German, Egyptian, and Jordanian partners. The meeting of the Ad Hoc Liaison Committee once again underscored the importance of heightened cooperation between Israel and the Palestinians in order to strengthen the resilience of the Palestinian economy and the effectiveness of their economic ties. This is all the more necessary given the COVID-19 pandemic. We welcome the efforts that have been made, including by Israel, to allow the Palestinian Health Ministry to provide several thousand doses of vaccine. We hope that this positive momentum will continue and will benefit all Palestinians, including in Gaza. In this difficult context, UNRWA is providing vital assistance to millions of Palestinians, and France calls on all states to provide support as much as they are able. It is around this pragmatic agenda focused on achieving results that France calls upon this council to unite with a view to relaunching the peace process. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of France for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank Special Coordinator Wennesland for his briefing and youth representatives of Palestine and Israel for their statements. The question of Palestine has remained unresolved for over 70 years. In the occupied Palestinian territories, young people, one generation after another, have suffered deeply from conflicts, violence, historical grievances, and poverty. The international community is obligated to show courage in honoring commitments, demonstrate conscience in upholding justice, and find a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution to this question at an early date, thus giving young people a peaceful home and a bright future.
You don't have to find it funny. Just
Here,
have to be true.
I would like to stress 3 points on this question. First, the right direction of the two-state solution must be adhered to. Independent statehood is a national right of the Palestinian people that cannot be denied. The two-state solution is a bottom line of international justice that cannot be compromised. The relevant UN resolutions and the principle of land for peace, among others, are the basic tenets that cannot be deviated from in solving Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It is on the above basis that the international community must join hands to seek an early solution. For some time, the issue of settlement activities has been preventing, severely weakening the prospect of the two-state solution. All acts undermining mutual trust must cease immediately, and Council Resolution 2334 be implemented in earnest. China calls upon Israel to end its settlement activities in OPT, stop demolition of Palestinian houses and destruction of Palestinian property, and take measures to prevent violence against civilians.
Steel. That's what I got to look up.
That said, Israel's right to survival and its legitimate security concerns must also be fully respected and guaranteed. Second, international synergy in promoting peace talks must be forged. Currently, new changes are on the horizon for the Middle East. The international community must seize this opportunity, act with a greater sense of urgency, and conduct a new round of diplomatic efforts in order to vigorously advance the Middle East peace process. Any effort that is conducive to the political settlement of this question will have China's active participation and support. The international community must explore and establish a multilateral mechanism with broad participation so as to generate robust synergy in promoting peace talks. Parties that have major influence on Palestine and Israel must uphold an objective and impartial stand and sincerely help the two parties narrow their differences and build up mutual trust. The Council should play its due role by working actively towards relaunching Palestinian-Israeli dialogue on an equal footing. China supports early holding of an international conference on peace in the Middle East, an initiative from President Abbas. At the ministerial meeting of the Arab League on February the 8th, foreign ministers emphasized the core status of Palestinian statehood, reaffirmed their common position on the two-state solution and the Arab Peace Initiative. This reflects the spirit of unity and justice of Arab states to which China expresses its appreciation. Third, stronger support must be given to boost unity and development in Palestine. The general elections this year represent an important political agenda in Palestine. 2 weeks ago, Palestinian political parties successfully held in Cairo the national dialogue, where they agreed on election arrangements, thus making a major stride in inter-Palestinian reconciliation. China welcomes such results and commends Egypt for its positive role. The international community must work together to support and ensure the smooth holding of the elections, with a view to strengthening inter-Palestinian unity and safeguarding and promoting the interests of the Palestinian people. The COVID-19 pandemic has severely affected socio-economic development in Palestine. The international community must continue its assistance to Palestine in combating the pandemic, growing economy, and improving livelihood. Concrete actions must be taken to support UNRWA. Mr. President, as a sincere friend of the Palestinian people, China firmly supports the legitimate demands of Palestine and supports the establishment of an independent state of Palestine with full sovereignty on the basis of the 1967 border and with East Jerusalem as its capital. This month, through UNRWA, anti-epidemic supplies donated by China have been officially distributed to the local people in the 141 health centers located in Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. China has also decided to donate COVID-19 vaccines to Palestine. These vaccines will be delivered to Palestine real soon.
Captain,
we will continue to do our best
the sensors are
to
gone,
help
but it
Palestine
appears to be
fight the
responding
pandemic,
normally.
and we will actively contribute
hear a
to seeking a
goddamn
comprehensive,
thing,
just, and lasting solution to the question of Palestine at an early date.
I'll have a Bluetooth in each ear.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Good movie, Takeoff of Star Trek. The flashing lights. I'll be the white black guy, but I can't tell because I can't hear. So every time somebody tells me I'm not black, I can't hear them.
Thank you, Mr. President.
'Cause I'm on
I
two
thank
phones
Special
at once.
Coordinator Reneslan for his
'Cause
briefing.
I'm on two phones at once.
And let me also express my appreciation for Mr. Orengyan and Ms. Malak Abu Soud for sharing their experiences on connecting Israeli and Palestinian youth. We are encouraged by several positive developments, which will hopefully contribute to reviving the Middle East peace process. In addition to the normalization of relations between Israel and certain Arab states, we have also seen trust in the work of the Middle East Quartet, which held a virtual. We have welcomed the decree by President Abbas on holding legislative, presidential, and national council elections. The recent agreement reached in Cairo between the Palestinian factions on the arrangements of the elections is another positive step towards holding free, inclusive elections, which should take place throughout the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem.
The occupied.
Estonia has also welcomed the resumption of civilian and security coordination between Israel and the Palestinian Authority.
This is the fucking
We encourage the parties to build upon these developments and take further practical steps, which will hopefully lead to more favorable
take me like a second and a half. These idiots won't stop pinging my fucking router. The fucking same thing happens. That other half of this interference is at the UN server there. It's not our system doing it.
To combat the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as increased economic cooperation. We welcome the participating representatives of the government of Israel and the Palestinian Authority at the ad hoc liaison committee meeting on 23rd of February. We call on all parties to refrain from any unilateral steps that increase tensions and undermine the viability of the two-state solution. We reiterate our call to Israel to halt the continued settlement expansion and demolitions in the occupied Palestinian territory. The recent demolitions and confiscation of items and structures at Humza al-Bakaya in the Jordan Valley are worrying and contrary to the international law. It is also essential to prevent any acts of violence against civilians, including acts of terror and acts of provocation, incitement, and destruction. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate Estonia's continued support to all efforts to resume meaningful negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians on all final status issues based on international law, relevant Security Council resolutions, and agreed parameters. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Estonia for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Norway.
Thank you, President, and thank you to Special Coordinator Veneslam for his briefing. We also welcome the briefing from Orengian and Malak Al-Soul. The voices of civil society and youth provide us with new perspectives and continue to bring vital input into our work and considerations of this Council. Your contribution today underscore exactly why Norway encouraged the inclusion at an early stage of young women and men in peace negotiations and conflict resolution. As we have heard from other speakers, 3 days ago, our Foreign Minister, together with the EU High Representative Borrell, hosted a virtual meeting of the Ad Hoc Liaison Committee, HLC. The purpose of this committee is to build viable institutional and economic foundations for the realization of a two-state solution. The committee welcomed the resumption of the cooperation between Israel and the Palestinian Authority last November, which has contributed to a more positive dynamic between the parties. Several delegations commended the normalization agreements, welcomed the US voice in the meeting, and strongly recommended to the parties and their international partners to relaunch a meaningful political process without delay. The immediate priority is, of course, to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, while the concerted and largely successful efforts of both parties to contain the spread of the pandemic gives ground for hope. 2020 saw, however, the Palestinian economy face one of the largest contractions since the establishment of the PA. The donor community must continue to strengthen the Palestinian public health system,
including by helping to provide sufficient vaccines. It must help alleviate the burden of the affected population and stimulate the recovery of the Palestinian economy. Taking a longer-term perspective, the donors emphasized that the Palestinian Authority needs higher, stable, and predictable revenues. Norway calls on the donor to step up and front-load their contribution to the Palestinian Authority and UNRWA. The parties were also asked to resume their work on a series of fiscal issues related mainly to the Paris Protocol and to improving access and movement for people and goods and facilitating trade. As chair, we plan to hold a ministerial meeting of the HLC in September to review progress on the recommendation made this week. President, turning to the developments on the ground, Norway is deeply concerned by the continued Israeli settlement activities on occupied Palestinian territory. The settlements are illegal in the international law and undermine the prospects of the two-state solution. We call on both sides to fully implement Resolution 2334 with all its provisions. We are particularly worried by Israel's decision to advance plans for thousands of housing units in sensitive areas such as Givat Matos and Har Homa. These activities acutely erode the prospects of establishing a continuous Palestinian state. We urge Israel to reverse these decisions. Norway is equally concerned by house demolitions and confiscations by Israel in the West Bank, especially in Humsa al-Bakai, as the special coordinator has elaborated. Many children are particularly affected by these actions. Children should always be protected. We are heartened by the scheduled Palestinian elections. We encourage all actors on the Palestinian and Israeli sides to contribute constructively in the election process. Norway will continue our support to the Palestinian Electoral Election Commission. We encourage the mobilization and better inclusion of women and youth in the election, as both candidates and voters. We also welcome the recent meeting of the Quartet, which is mandated by this Council to facilitate Middle East peace process negotiations. A revitalization of this format is a positive step. While the two-state solution seems increasingly elusive, that does not make it less urgent. Norway is a strong and consistent supporter of the two-state solution based on international law, relevant Security Council resolutions, and the internationally agreed parameters. This is the only viable solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The changed dynamic in the region, including the normalization agreements between Israel and several Arab countries, can and should be used to revitalize the peace process, and the UN should play a key role. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Norway for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank the Special Coordinator, Tor Venesland, for his briefing. We listened closely to the Israeli and Palestinian student representatives. Achieving lasting peace and security in the Middle East and North Africa region remains one of the most important tasks on the international agenda. It goes without saying that one of the fundaments of achieving long-term stability in the region is making progress on the Middle East peace process, with, as a central element of that, a just solution to the Palestinian question. We note the resumption of contact between Palestinians and Israelis on matters of security and taxation,